show on the road. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Audit Committee. My name is John Chesshire and I'm the chair of this meeting. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. In terms of housekeeping, we're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts. For those watching via YouTube, if you're so minded, you can complete one of our residents' feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. We always introduce the attendees, and we normally do this by working round the table. My name is John Chesshire, and I'm the chair of the meeting. You can introduce yourselves, press the button, then switch it off when you've finished. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'm Councillor Nick Dennison. I'm Vice Chair of the meeting.
Councillor Higgins, Member of the Committee.
Councillor Douglas Mills.
Councillor Tony Bells.
Councillor Jew Nelson.
I'm Tony Zayman, Chief Executive of the Council.
Lloyd White, Head of Democratic Services.
Daniel Toohey, Head of Legal Services.
Matthew Wallbridge, Chief Operating Officer of the Council.
Andy Goodwin, Chief Finance Officer and Section 151.
Andrew McLeod, Chief Accountant.
Alex Brown, Head of Counter-Fraud.
Claire Baker, Head of Internal Audit and Risk Assurance.
Ryan Dowell, Democratic Services Officer.
And we have a couple of colleagues joining us online. Pete.
Hi, I'm Director of the Treasury Page into Statutory Accounts.
Mark River, External Auditor from Ernst & Young. Thank
you all very much indeed. We'll move on to the agenda and we'll proceed with the meeting. Number one, apologies for absence.
We have no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest above anything that has previously been declared. That's no. Thank you very much. And just to confirm that the committee's agenda this evening is all part 1, so it's all going to be considered in public. There are no part 2 agenda items today. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of July 2025. You'll find that in the papers. Looking at the minutes, any comments on page 1? Page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Thank you very much. No comments, minutes accepted as produced. Thank you. Agenda item 5 is an update on the GRIP and the Finance Modernisation Programme, I think, as well. Thank you very much. Matthew.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, and I hope you all had a good summer. It feels like we weren't here very long ago. It must be about a month ago that we did the detailed work on going through the Finance Modernisation Programme and the Governance Review Improvement Plan. So I don't intend to go through the document again, but happy to take questions later. I'll give you a quick overview because we've done quite a lot in the last month, as you would expect. It's not the sudden time where everyone goes off on holiday as council officers. We've been working really hard over August on these critical areas. So in terms of the governance review implementation improvement plan, is we've made some changes to our governance over the last month. So we've bolstered our governance in terms of our HRA and our capital, making sure that we've got critical meetings for our senior officers that feed into the corporate management team, so we've got more robust governance in those areas. We've also drafted, which will come to the Cabinet on the 18th, the annual performance report. So we'll be presenting that and subsequently to the Select committees, and in terms of work stream 3, we've appointed the lawyers in local government who've started the review of that area. In terms of the finance modernisation programme, we've been working diligently on the 24-25 statement of accounts with our partners Grant Thornton and doing a significant amount of due diligence to make sure it's accurate and robust as possible. Accompanying that, we've been doing the monthly budget and savings monitoring, which will again be presented to the Cabinet on the 18th. And the third string of that is we've been starting the budget setting process for 26-27, which means we've been conducting Star Chamber across the organisation, which are both challenging the current savings but also looking at savings over the next 3 years. Lastly, but no means least, is we've been working on the Oracle improvement. So as part of the finance modernisation programme and delivering the concurrent improvements to Oracle, we are working on a monthly cycle of improvements to improve how we're doing things, as well as delivering a review programme to understand the improvements we need to make across the financial year. So we've got a robust plan to deliver all those improvements, as well as making concurrent improvements. For example, we've been looking at the integration of capital monitoring into our budget monitoring within Oracle, along with a number of other improvements. So that's a quick overview of what we've delivered in the last month, and over the next, before we meet you at the next committee, because we'll be doing another update, is we'll be doing a significant amount of work in both of these areas as well.
Thank you, Matthew, and it was less than a month ago, I think, pretty much, that we did work through this at our last meeting. Appreciate that probably not much has changed, although lots of meetings and lots of further considerations. But over to colleagues, any follow-on? Councillor Hall. Councillor Nelson, sorry, forgive me.
Thank you, Chairman. Matthew, I noted that a large part of the financial modernization program is just a plan to correct the inaccurate account and report which has been presented to Cabinet, the Council and to residents over the past more than 10 years. Can you tell me exactly what were the incorrect figures in the previous account and who was responsible for the error which were made?
Andy, one for you, I think.
Thank you, Councillor. There's a number of things that came out as part of the finance modernisation programme. So we are doing a detailed review of the balance sheet to make sure that we've got certainty in its balances going forward. So the things that we uncovered as part of the finance modernisation programme were there was an group of assets. They were shops and garages that transferred from the general fund to the HRA, and we needed to, the calculation on how the debt provision cover was calculated in the balance sheet and in the accounts didn't match with the asset transfer, so we had to update that. And then we had a negative reserve, an overdrawn reserve, in 23-24 accounts, so we can't carry negative reserves. So that was 5.5 million, so we had to write that out, so that had to be expensed in 24-25. The other updates weren't prior year changes, they were changes in methodology and the way we carry out our work. So one of the things that I'm responsible for as 151 officer is ensuring that the bad debt provision is adequate for the level of cover I think that we need against the debt. So we have decided to go with a more prudent approach, and we therefore are covering more of our debt now with the provision, recognising that we need to do some more work on our debt position. So part of the finance modernisation programme, we are looking at an overarching debt project to make sure that we've got a good grip of that and it all comes into one place. So that led to changes in both the collection fund side with council tax and business rates impacting on Hillingdon, although within the collection fund the surplus deficits impact on next year's budget, so you'll see that in December Cabinet's consultation budget, and then some of it impacted on the way our debts were covered in year for revenue side. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Nelson, a follow-on, and then we'll go to Councillor Higgins.
Thank you. leading on from my previous question, it seems to me that there has been no apology from any officer or cabinet member for the false account and budget reports, which has been presented in the past. It seems certain that there would have been significant warning about the unreliability of the records, which were not shared with full council when the budget was approved in February 2025, on the assumption that the chief executive was or should have been aware of the failure. If he wasn't, why not?
Thank you.
Yeah, Andy, thank you.
Great, thank you. So in terms of the calculation on the asset transfer between general fund and HRA, that is a very technical calculation, so it's part of the minimum revenue provision. It's not something that the CEO could look at on a piece of paper and be able to validate. So he's relying on the Section 151 officer and on the external audit challenge around how these are pulled together. Just to point out that this transfer of asset happened in 13-14, so it was also not, it wasn't transferred at a time when EY were our auditors. So it's something that it predates me overseeing this role, and it goes back very far in history. Last year we did have the negative reserve, so that one should have been identified, but because the way the accounts work, we group our reserves together under categories. Our categories were not going overdrawn, so it's not something that when you're reviewing your statement of accounts, it just jumps out. It's only when you're looking at general ledger detail that you would kind of really identify these, which certainly isn't something that you would expect the CEO to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I'm going to go to Councillor Higgins next, then we'll go to Councillor Bells.
Thank you. Two questions, actually. First question, when will it be finished and when will it be up to date? Mark, Matthew, that's for you. And the second question is, which has always baffled me, is that you're meant to be monitoring the budget on a monthly basis. I don't understand why it's taking so long. If you've got information that's being printed out, if you're doing it the old-fashioned way, which I seem to think at this present moment in time we should be doing that, and we should be putting the digital side aside at the moment, because we are so, I mean, the next report is going to come showing that we're so out everywhere else. So I want to know, when did that change? You've been here, Andy, a long time. You know, 10 years ago, every month you were giving the nominal ledger balances to the leader, and we were seeing what was going with this. I want to know what's changed, what's happened in the staffing structure, or something that these simple processes are not being done anymore.
Andy, thanks.
Yep, so I'll take the monitoring question first. So the Council does carry out monthly budget monitoring, as you say. We have migrated to a new system that went live May 2024. That did bring with it a number of challenges. As a result, we have, so in 24-25, in months 2 and 4, month 3 doesn't go to cabinet, we used Excel because we were still implementing changes and trying to improve the system. We started using Oracle EPM from month 5 of 24-25. However, there have been teething issues in the way that is built and the way that it gets used as a monitoring tool. So in terms of your question around how we use the ledger and the printouts and the nominal ledger, getting down to that kind of level of granularity, within the ERP system, which that's your kind of ledger, your accounts payable, accounts receivable, and EPM is used for your monitoring kind of monitoring platform. So we need to we've done work as part of the finance modernisation program, making sure that our opening balances on the new system balance and everything joins up from the legacy system as we've migrated. So that has now been confirmed. We're completely happy with that, but that was a piece of work that was kind of going on through 24-25. So then once we had that kind of surety that we had migrated correctly from one system to the other, we then started focusing on how we're using the EPM system. We have run some training back when we went live, but there's recognition that you get budget manager churn. And so we're part of the finance modernisation program again, we are looking at how we deliver training to budget managers, not just on how they use the Oracle platform, but also on roles and responsibilities and how this all kind of fits together, so they understand not just how to push the buttons, but also what they should be thinking about and contemplating when they're carrying out their monitoring. So we are on a journey, and we've got a kind of roadmap on how we improve this, but it's very much a journey that is kind of I would say partway there. We are looking at having definite improvements this year, but it's a journey, so we need to make sure that everyone's trained up, they understand their roles, and then they know how to use the tools that they have available to them. We're also running workshops with finance staff and with budget managers so that everyone is feeding into that process, so that when we go to do our Oracle improvements, it's not just this is what finance we think we need, but it's also what do budget managers, service managers, and all think they need as a tool in order to engage with, understand and manage their services. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
I know all that, Andy, because you told me that last time. The fact is that at the moment, our financial position is in a very sort of delicate position, to put it mildly. So, in this committee last time, you said that you're still running both of the systems. So then, if you're running both of the systems, why was the outturn so bad this year?
Thank you. So the outturn position moved by 20 million from month 10, which was the last reported position, to the outturn. 14 million of that was the accounting changes. So these were all one-off step changes. These weren't things that we weren't capturing as part of our monitoring process. It's not that we were missing doing this piece of work, it's that we changed. So on the bad debt side, we changed the policy. So I've gone with a more prudent approach so that we're better covered against our debt. So these aren't things that are happening in terms of how the service are running their services and not understanding their finances. These are one-off step changes to put us on a better footing on our balance sheet. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. The other question obviously was asked when all this system will be complete. I mean, you read reports about Oracle as one of the worst systems and SAP is another worst system. Did we not even think about using something that was a bit more robust and a bit more up to date? Was that just down to cost?
So in terms of when will it be finished, I'll answer this in the way that nobody likes is it's never finished. So it's a platform as a service, so actually it's a living system that improves and changes and adds improvements and adds additional features in on a regular basis, mostly quarterly. So what we're looking at is over the rest of the financial year, we're going to be making improvements month on month, and we recognised that last year when we set the budget in terms of the capital transformation programme. So we had identified the budget we need to improve the system. So we've got the budget and we've got an improvement plan that spans 25-26, and then into the next financial year we'll be looking at optimising Oracle and sort of catching up with all the additional features that get improved, making sure we've got a robust setup. As Andy said, it's about how do you optimise a system, and Oracle is the market leader in local government at the moment, more than any other system. A number of other local authorities have come into issues in its implementation, which we have, but actually the ERP side of things has always been pretty functional, works pretty well. The EPM side is the bit that needs some improvement, and we are making improvements to that at the moment, so again a regular month on month, but it's not just about the system as well, it's about the training, it's about how do we monitor our budgets in the first place and making sure we're catching up, because we recognise as an organisation that we implemented it, we did the training a fair while ago now, and then we are going to have to put additional investment into retraining, optimising what we do, and we've been learning the lessons from other local authorities. So I said it at the last committee, we're not in the disaster place that you see in lots of other local authorities around Oracle. We recognised this a year ago. We've had an improvement programme that's lasted a year now, and these things unfortunately do take time, they do cost money, but we recognised it early on. We've understood the mistakes we've made in the past, and we are seeking to rectify those, but it is not a case that we need to look for a new system. It's there's no question in my mind that we would ever need to go down that track. It's about taking the mostly good product we have and optimising that over a period, but recognising that humans use systems, and actually we need to support the humans to use the systems better, not just improve the system. So that's what we'll be doing over the coming months.
Final question, then I've got some questions.
Because I'm not really getting the answer I want, really. All right, let's word it in a different way. When have we now stopped using the old system and we're just using Oracle now? Is that what's happened to this today?
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. It was a month ago where you gave us a briefing, and the briefing was very informative and helped give us a clearer view of what had happened and the plans for what is happening. Do you remain as confident today as you were a month ago that the plans are sufficient to address the recommendations made by both external audit, internal audit, and the other improvements that you want to make yourselves?
I can definitely say I feel more confident a month on, because every week, every day we work on it, we become more confident, we understand more about what we need to do to improve it. We've spent quite a lot of time, both myself and Andy, with the team working on the learning and development programme that we need, not just in the system in terms of what we need to do around finance and budget monitoring across the organisation. As I said a little bit earlier about how we're integrating capital monitoring into Oracle, which is not an easy thing to do, and actually a lot of local authorities haven't done that and have made big mistakes doing that. So I feel a lot more confident. We've got a coherent plan that spans the rest of this financial year, and we've got the budget to do it as well. So we've got the budget to do it. We've got a plan. We're improving what we do, but with all these things, as I sit as the SRO for it, is you have to review it on a regular basis. So we have weekly meetings, we've got good governance that sits around it with the leader as well. So we're being really robust. It's one of our key priority projects, and no stones unturned in terms of how we're looking to improve Oracle.
You mentioned training and the need to kind of update and retrain people. I understand that it can take time and needs to be repeated. Are you getting the engagement that you need from across the organisation outside of, say, the finance space, who ought to be invested in this in any case?
Yeah, and certainly part of my role is to listen to the rest of the organisation, and I recognise that we need to do a little bit better from corporate services and finance to support the organisation a bit better. So that's why we're reviewing both how we're doing learning and development, both from a budget monitoring and an Oracle place. And we took the decision to slow down some of that previously. Over the last month, we've decided to quicken that up a little bit, given the need, because we were coming into month 6, looking at things like our budget manuals, looking at things at how we do the Oracle training. But it goes back to having that systems-wide thinking about what do you need as a manager in the organisation at the different levels to perform your function, and how you bring in the expertise externally as well as internally to help rolling out that training. And certainly I've been reflecting on what good practice looks like in government, and that's a blend of external people but also internal people, and that's where Andy's team with the finance business partners and heads of finance are critical in supporting the rest of the directorates in helping them incrementally improve how they're using Oracle. But it is a key area of focus. It's not you can improve the system and you can spend all the money on the system if you're not backing that off with understanding how you're going to land that in the organisation and getting the real value out of the system and then optimising the system. It's a bad investment. So we want to make sure this is a good investment, and we continue to improve and make the productivity and the benefits we'll take from having Oracle.
Thank you. A final question from me, and then I'll pass to Councillor Dennis. Is there enough capacity, both in the corporate services space, to kind of lead and to conduct the workshops and such like that you'll continue to operate? And is there enough capacity in the business to receive the results of that and crack on with it in addition to the day job?
I'm sure if I asked my directorate colleagues, they would always say there's not enough capacity, which is the perennial piece. But I mean, we're lucky we partner with Grant Thornton, and they've added so much value in terms of being leaders in this field, particularly in some of the work they've been doing with other Oracle implementations across the country. So we're reaping the benefits of taking some of those best practice examples, and they give us the additional capacity, which again we recognised a while ago and we put into the budget. So this isn't news to us about the Finance Modernisation Programme, and it's not news about Oracle, because we identified this a long time ago and we put in the capacity to make sure we can do that. You know, as a corporate management team member, we do this as a team, making sure that we've got the capacity both within the organisation and within corporate services to do this as one council. So this is not a corporate services thing, the implementation of Oracle, although I own it. It's about how it works within the organisation, and they're the regular conversations we have at the top table and also with the senior management team. So we do regular updates to make sure that everyone understands where we are, everyone knows the improvements we're making, and you know, if you're head of service, you can be quite frustrated because you've been trained, you might have forgotten some of the use of it. We've reverted back to another way of working, then we were reverting back to Oracle. So we recognise that life's not perfect, and doing systems improvements aren't always perfect. But we recognise we're being transparent and honest in our position, and we recognised it enough to make sure we've got the capacity. So I feel comfortable where we are. I'm really happy with the plan we've got. I'm really happy we've got the right partners in place, and we've got clear direction moving forward.
Thank you for the reassurance. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask a question around the Star Chamber process leading into the budget process, because every single year that's a really important thing we're doing, but this year it's even more important because we need to make sure that we set a budget where our expenditure basically matches our income, including the savings we need to do. So are you confident that those within the Star Chamber are getting the information they need in order to be able to do that, and then the governance arrangements on top will ensure that the decisions are made in order for us, when the budget comes to us at council, that we're given a budget where the expenditure matches the income?
Thank you, Councillor. So Star Chamber sessions have started now. So we're going to run 3 separate rounds between now and December Cabinet, so that by the time we're presenting the consultation budget, we have a greater level of confidence in what we're presenting. Part of this work is also to do correlation work on our modelling. So we're looking at where our big demand areas are, so adult social care, children's homelessness, and then making sure that those models correlate, the budget models correlate to what's happening in monitoring. In terms of that question about resource, we're bringing in an additional resource into adult social care to assist with the modelling in that space. We are also working closely with Matthew's team to make sure that data is working and flowing, and it kind of goes out in terms of everyone's getting that same understanding, service and finance. In terms of the MTFS timetable and the Star Chambers, like I said, we've got 3 different rounds, so that each time we're refining and getting more accurate. Part of the big unknown is going to be fair funding review, so that's due to come out. Government has said we'll get the outcome at 30th of November. Normally it's 3rd week of December, so let's see if they can stick to that, because with fair funding changing the funding horizon for all local government over the next 3 years, that's going to be a key piece to the puzzle. And then once we've reached the third one, the third round, we'll then be ready to set that consultation budget. And that's not to say there won't be changes between December Cabinet and February final proposals, but clearly our expectation is to have a much more robust position by then, assuming we get the fair funding settlement in time. Thank you. I think Matthew's going to follow up.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good question. I think I feel content that we're starting it earlier this year. So, as Andy said, having 3 rounds gives us a more robust challenge. I think, led by the Chief Executive, we've been encouraged to put all the options on the table now. So, making sure that we're thinking as broad as possible, thinking about how we run as an organisation, and thinking really creatively about how we can do things differently. It's also an interesting time because we're doing the current savings as well as thinking about next year. So there's a kind of parallel run at the moment, which makes it a really interesting time for us as officers, because some of the things we're doing are informing the savings for next year. For example, let me give one example. So we're doing a procurement review at the moment, which is looking at our spending against all of our contracts, which enables us to look at operating models and sourcing models for different services. Now, that's across the whole council. That helps us to inform some of the options that will be placed in front of Cabinet in December, but also we've got a few bites at the cherry to refine them. So very much now is those ideas, not big business cases, and again I think that's a really positive move for the council, is to not get wedded into the detail behind all the options. It's looking at the big options in an amount of detail and then prioritising those and then taking them forward through to options appraisals, business cases. So we'll have everything's on the table, and we'll hone that down to make sure we've got a robust budget when we present it back to Cabinet in December. But we'll go through some iterations, and I think as a senior leader of the council, we've been given the space to understand what does good look like, across the public sector, and really test ourselves in being creative about how we're running the services, and not just think about next year, to think about 3 years' time as well. And again, that's been an important shift in thinking about what are the medium-term solutions we're coming back for as a council. So I'm really encouraged, and actually we had one today. We had the adult social care one, and we had the majority of them. There's only 2 more to go next week. One of them's mine. So they're really enjoyable sessions. We're getting a lot of value out of them, and we're going to be looking forward to presenting those back to Cabinet.
Thank you, Matthew. A quick follow-on from Councillor Dennis, then Councillor Bowles, and then we need to move on.
It's partly because that was a very good answer to the first half of my question, but the second half was around governance. I suppose maybe to slightly adapt to that part of the question, I've got a second bite at it. When a select committee is going to be brought into this in order to analyse what's going on, ask questions about the sort of modelling and what's being proposed, I understand select committees are not managers, don't make decisions, but I feel like in the past, budget information in the areas came too late with maybe not enough detail in terms of forecasting. So is there a plan to involve select committees earlier in more detail as part of the governance process?
Yeah, as part of the governance process this year, select committees, so we've got the round of select committees coming up, which will be reviewing the month 2 Cabinet report, and every time a Cabinet report has been produced, the select committee will get a chance to review that. So we'll be on a bit like the GRIP and the FMP will come to this committee on every single meeting, the budget will come to every single select committee meeting to be scrutinised in its most widest sense. So yeah, we've got all the sessions coming up over the next month. So so that, and again, that's more robust governance that we've had in the past, and as part of what we want to do is be more transparent, be more open, and as I said at the start, that's the performance report as well. So that'll be presented to Cabinet, and it will go to all the select committees as well. So that, again, that's a change in how we're governing the organisation over this financial year.
Councillor Bowles and then Councillor Nell.
Thank you, Chair. The Finance Modernisation Programme is due to conclude in October 25. Will that deadline be achieved? Can you please let me know the current and anticipated total cost of the support from Grant Thornton and SIPFA? I assume that this will be charged to the transformation programme and paid by capital receipts. Please confirm. As a great part of the work has been to identify and correct the false data and financial figures in the past, can you confirm that part of the costs should be charged directly to the general fund? And also, who made the decision to use Grant Thornton instead of SIPFA for most of the work on the FMP and the GRIP, and why?
I think there's several questions there, so do you want to make us up, Matthew, and then come back to clarify the question?
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the timelines, you're right. The first phase of the Finance Modernisation Programme is due to conclude in October 2025. We'll be reviewing that on a regular basis. So as part of that, we're obviously reviewing the Oracle work. So we're looking at that at the moment to make sure we've got the plan and the resources in place for the rest of the financial year. So it's likely that will be extended, but that's more the Oracle side. We're actually reviewing that over the next few weeks to look at the finance modernisation programme to see what bits will need to be added to or improved out the back of the first phase of it, which Grant Thornton are doing in conjunction with us. So again, I'm not going to say it's going to finish in October, because it's not going to finish in October. We'll come back to you at the next committee when we've got a fully formed plan for the rest of the financial year. In terms of the costs, there was I can't give you the exact costs, but in terms of we initially employed SIPFA to do a short piece of work to understand what we could do to improve our finances. We have been working with Grant Thornton since September last year, and we looked at both combining the Oracle work with the finance work, which, you know, from a productivity and a sort of professional point of view, that's the right approach. So we looked at combining those two pieces of work and made sure that we appointed Grant Thornton, who were in the optimal place to be able to do both pieces of work, because you can't improve Oracle without improving how you're doing your budget monitoring processes, because they're symbiotic. So rather than having an approach where SIPFA would just do the finance and another company would do the Oracle improvements, that isn't an optimal way for an organisation. So that was part of a decision that we recommended. What questions have I missed, because there were quite a lot of them in there?
About the charge.
So as I explained previously, the cost of them were already identified in the capital transformation programme, and they are against our capital transformation programme. So that's in Appendix G of the council report. They're not revenue costs; they are capital transformation costs. So that's from our capital receipts.
Who made the decision to use Grant Thornton and instead of SIPFA for most of the work on the FMP and the GRIP, and why?
I don't see the relevance of that question.
Tony, do you want to come in at that point?
Yeah,
we'll see if we need to re-clarify the question.
Yeah, just a summary point. I think Matthew answered one half of that question with the fact that we were already working with Grant Thornton and the symbiotic relationship between the system and the practice and processes of accounting, so that deals with that. And the other point to raise is when we asked SIPFA for their overview, they gave us some level of detail, but their plan of action was 3 years. And we wanted something slightly more expedient. So we took some of the learning from their review and folded it into the work that we asked GT to do, who have, one of the key things that SIPFA recommended was the balance sheet review. We're undertaking the balance sheet review with Grant Thornton, which has identified a number of the issues that have brought about the corrections that we've been talking about, and certainly as an officer, and I would hope as a council we should be pleased that we've done the work to identify those issues, to rectify them, and though those things are being put right now, because had we not, then we'd be going through a budget setting process, not having understood those circumstances, and compounding them for yet another year. So I think, in summary, the GT were already working with us. They're expert in both areas that we were covering. SIPFA gave a very, 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 very long haul approach, but we did take the learning from the review that they did and folded it into a much more sort of short and focused piece of work.
Okay, I think we're going to have to move forward, and we may pick up. Oh, Councillor Nelson, sorry, I keep calling. Councillor Nelson, you had one final question, and then we really do need to move
Thank you,
on.
Chair. Thank you. Chair, this report is obviously the governance report as well as the financial report. We should really have some more time really to ask more questions on it. I know you want to progress, but we should get enough time to put questions to the
Very happy that you ask a question.
Thank you. This is in July 2024. It was announced that the significant error has been reported in the accounts of the DSG grants, including...
I think this might be for the next agenda item, potentially. Remember, at the minute we're just looking at the
It's part of the governance review improvement plan, item 5.
Carry on with the question, then we'll see whether it's better to pick it up in the subsequent.
Thank you, Chair. It was announced that significant errors has been reported in the account for the DSG, Designated School Grant, including was a total of 4 million of claimed assets, presumably debtors, which have been claimed in the 2022 and 2023 accounts and were reserved in 2024 accounts. Can you please let us know exactly what those national assets were which the adjustment represent? Should the fact that there has been irregularities in that account have also raised a similar concern about manipulation in the general funds? And just one more can I add on to that, Chair, so we can move on with that. The GRIP seems to show almost all areas of amber, suggesting they are progressing close to expectation. And there are some concerns, it seems, that Ernst Young are less convinced by that assessment, evidenced by Section 24 notice. Why should this committee be convinced, and why do you believe that Ernst Young are wrong?
Andy, do you want to start certainly with the first question, and then we'll take it from there? Look.
Yeah, certainly. So the DSG point that you raised, there were accruals added to the DSG account that recognised additional income that was due from the Department of Education that should have been reversed into the following year when the cash came in, so that as the cash comes in, the accrual is cleared. However, as the entries were entered late into the DSG accounts, they'd missed the auto-reverse window. So what ended up happening is we carried some debtors on the balance sheet that had already been paid but were still sat on the balance sheet. So the adjustment was to write those back into through the DSG revenue account to remove the debtors from the balance sheet as they were no longer valid debtors.
Thank you for the clarification. Matthew, do you want to pick up the second question from Councillor Nelson?
Yep, I reviewed the GRIP before it was published, and my assessment was the majority of the statuses are rightly amber. So red would mean, i.e., we're not delivering them, or it's massively deviated from the baseline. We're in progress with all of those areas. I think the actions that you'll see, and we report the actions on a quarterly basis. If you go back to looking at the actions, there are significant actions, significant progress against every single line, which are amber. We haven't achieved them all, which is why they're not green apart from one, but actually they're all amber because they're progressing well, they're progressing to their timelines, and they're certainly not red because that would mean there's no progress or significant deviation, and that's not the position we are on any of those lines. So my assessment is that amber is absolutely the right status for those. It's not an assessment against EY, it's an assessment of the progress that we're setting against the actions in that plan. Thank you.
We will move on, and we can pick up some of this and some more of this, no doubt, in the next agenda item as well. Agenda item 6, issuance of recommendations under section 24, schedule 7.2 of the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014. Andy, you're going to introduce this paper, and then is it over to EY to give us a little bit more context from their side? Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. So EY have issued us with statutory recommendations, so they're all, hopefully everyone's had a chance to read the report. And their report's also appended in with the papers. So I think really Hillingdon Council, from our perspective, we welcome the recommendations, and actually we have already recognised that we're working towards these, and we have been working towards these before the recommendations were issued. So these were things that were already in train, as evidenced really through the FMP and GRIP updates that have been to this board before, this committee before. That was it for me from an interest. I'm happy to hand over to Mark. Thanks.
I'm just going to give Mark the opportunity to give a little bit of context from the EY front, and then we'll turn to questions. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so first I guess just in terms of framing, so this was a report which was issued to full council. Obviously very happy to talk through the audit committee here, but that's the direction the report was intended for. Though more scrutiny on it, the better. So the committee will be familiar with the background here, that over the last couple of years through our Life Money work, we've expressed increasing concern about the financial sustainability of the council and how that was being managed, as well as issues around the quality of the council's data, which are not unrelated. Some of those data quality issues have fed into the difficulties with managing the financial position. We issued the previous Life Money commentary earlier in the year with our opinion on 23-24 that highlighted some of the concerns and made some recommendations. We have taken the step of issuing the council with the recommendations set out in this report because we have some concerns about the pace with which those actions are being picked up. We fully recognise, as has been presented to the committee earlier today, the financial modernisation programme. At the time that this report was pulled together, that programme was very much in the early phases of implementation. I think it's fair to say that it's going through a multi-stage process, of which it's probably still in the first stage, maybe transitioning to the second stage of that process. I know that there's a fair way to go down the road. Prompted as well by the outturn report and indications of where that was likely to land, which showed significant deterioration beyond even kind of where we understood the council to be when we issued the Value for Money commentary sort of 5-6 months ago. So the report highlights a number of different elements which I think all interlink here. One is the financial position itself and just how precarious that currently is. One is the DSG deficit, and I know some of the committee members have questions around that and happy to field. But then it's the wider impact it's having on the council, as highlighted, for example, by the council's internal auditor in their annual opinion on the previous financial year, which is actually because of the need to manage that financial position and the very manual nature of some of the processes around that because of the data quality issues. It's having an impact on the ability of the council and the rest of the governance, and if you like, the ability of the council to do the other things that the council does, and the risk that therefore you end up with almost a bit of a contagion that it consumes so much capacity, other areas don't get the attention they might deserve. So that was kind of why we took this step. The report has a fair bit of detail behind those findings in it, and I'm happy to take this read rather than run through in detail here, but obviously I will answer any questions the committee may have on it.
Thank you, Mark. I think we're going to have some questions. I'll go from this end first. So, Councillor Higgins, please.
Thank you, Chair. The first, I've got many questions, but I'll just answer one so everybody gets a chance. But it's on the DSG. Back in 2018, you wrote in the accounts that the DSG was not our responsibility, it was a government responsibility. Since then, we've had a deal with government that we would pay half and they would write it all off, which now I believe is now being suspended. I asked Mark earlier on about this question, that why hasn't that been given to EY, that sort of information, and why have we then taken the responsibility back again? If government decide that they're not going to follow that government and not agree to adhere to what they've agreed, in my view, then you just do that. You just say, right, it's not our debt, it's the government's debt. I don't understand why it was okay in 2018 and it's not now, right now.
I'm not sure who would be best placed to try to unpick that thorny question. Andy?
Would it help, Chair, if I just provided a bit of background in terms of how we position in the report, and then if officers have anything to say on the arrangements and the conversation with government, which they'll be close.
Yeah, if you kick off, Mark, and then we'll turn to Andy. Look.
Yeah, so the dedicated schools grant, I think it's worth understanding the arrangements from an accounting perspective and the budgetary perspective there. So schools historically were just part of the council's budget, managed as part of the council, finances us for any other area. A number of years ago, an override was put in place, which effectively said if you're running a deficit in the school's budget, that deficit doesn't flow through to the general fund as any other kind of service line deficit might. it can be carried forward into future years, and from an accounting perspective, it's held as an unusable reserve. So it kind of sits aside on the balance sheet, away from the general fund, earmarked reserves, and the other amounts that the council has available for spending. That override was due to end in 2026. It was recently extended to March 2028, but as it currently stands, it will end then. And what that would mean is, at that point, in the absence of any other arrangements, and full caveat here, most people in the sector are expecting some form of arrangement to come through, but don't necessarily know what that will look like at this stage. That balance effectively becomes something the council will then need to manage as part of its general fund at that point, because you were no longer able to park it off to one side as an unusual reserve as you currently do. And the way we have reported on it within this report is highlighting the fact that actually over the last couple of years that deficit has grown considerably for the council, and it is now larger by a factor of several than the available reserves of the council. So if you were to end up in the position where current position financially stayed broadly the same between now and 2028, that statutory override ends and the ability to park it off separate from the council's main reserves ends, effectively you would end up with a negative reserve position and be technically insolvent. And that is the point that we've tried to draw out here. The council needs to manage that and has a plan in place with government to manage that, and officers may be able to talk to that. But that doesn't move away from the fact that that plan has largely been about stabilising the growth in the deficit, and it does not address the fact that there is still that historical deficit that when the statutory override ends, currently is a problem that does not have a solution.
Thank you for the... Do you want to come in at that point? Councillor Higgins.
It's not clarity. Thank you, Doug. The issue I'm trying to get in is that the DSG is a very complicated mechanism that, as a council, and over many years, we've had to sort of adhere to the school forum. Okay? So, that hasn't been put into this report. This report says that we should take responsibility for it. Now, I can't understand, going back, it wasn't. If the government then has decided not to adhere, and that should be in here, that there is a deal instead of being one of the conditions of this section 24. It's just ridiculous. You're putting something in there that is impossible for this council to fulfil because it's not our responsibility.
Andy, do you have a view on that?
Thank you. So I can't particularly remember what we wrote in reports in 2018-19, and I wasn't actually covering the DSG back then, so I'll talk to you through the position where we're at today. So the DSG deficit, we're saying it's a government issue in that the high needs block is systemically underfunded across the country, and that is why we believe it is their responsibility to fund us the level of funding that we believe we should be entitled to. Our DSG deficit, our in-year position was significantly higher, and our children's services have been doing great work to reduce that in-year deficit. So the month 2 position that went to July Cabinet reported 12.5 million in-year deficit, which is each year we're getting that lower and lower, so we should be getting close to break even within a couple of years. In terms of the safety valve agreement, so the DfE entered a safety valve agreement with us that you mentioned, where the council were going to put in year 1 £4 million in from reserves from our balance sheet, and then years 2 to 5 we're going to put £4 million per year from capital receipts. And at the same time, the DfE were then going to grant fund us to a similar level kind of match funding approach. What happened was the DfE don't actually have the authority to agree for us to put capital receipts into the DSG deficit. That can only be approved by MHCLG. So what the DfE needed to do was then go to MHCLG, Secretary of State, and request a capitalisation direction to allow us to transfer capital receipts into the DSG deficit. So in year 1 we did put our £4 million of reserves on the balance sheet into the DSG. In year 2, which was our first year of capital receipts that were due to go into the deficit, the DfE failed to get a capitalisation direction, so they gave us additional grant funding to put into the deficit. Thereafter, the DSG deficit was suspended, and which meant we were unable to put our contribution in, and the DfE also stopped putting their contribution in, and we're in current negotiation on coming and agreeing a new safety valve agreement.
Right. Councillor Mills, do you want to re-ask the question?
Right, so this wasn't... Well,
it's not his question.
this isn't the point I was going to raise on the section 24. What my colleague, Councillor Higgins, is trying to say, or has said, it's not the history lesson of what we have done in terms of discussions with government. It is before that. What changed to make this amount of money that was in deficit have to be accountable in such a public way that it is now acting as a dead weight around the neck of LBH accounts? Because there has always been deficits on the school's budget, and I can attest for that, having been around a few years. But before, the advice that we were given in Cabinet, and the then leader was given, and Councillor Higgins was in the same Cabinet as I was a very clear advice. We don't, from both, this is from the audit team and from your predecessors, both at Chief Executive and Head of Finance in those years, was that this deficit, it is our responsibility as London Borough of Hillingdon to keep the cash flow going, otherwise schools ground to a halt, but you do not account for it as being a burden and a outstanding deficit that has to be balanced. So the exam question that I think my colleague is really trying to ask is, not, and with respect, what the two gentlemen previously have answered is perfectly correct, but it wasn't the question. The question is, what changed prior to entering into DSG valves that means that we now have to account for it? Because it was already on the balance sheet as a reserve, but as a cash flow reserve to keep the schools going.
Okay, so has something changed? Was it presented differently previously? Andy?
Thank you, Councillor. So hopefully I'll answer the question then correctly this time. Within the Council's accounting principles policies, there are a number of funds that sit segmented within ring fences. The DSG sits within the general fund. It is not a segmented fund. The government put a statutory override around the deficit, and then they put that override due to end years down the road. And then as we travel through time, we get closer and closer to that point. So what's happened is we're getting closer to the point when the statutory override comes off. So it was due to come off on 31st of March 26, which would have been obviously next year. And as Mark mentioned, MHCLG have now pushed that back 2 more years. So effectively under the legislation that exists as of today, we have 2.5 years to address the DSG deficit before the ring fence comes off and then it hits the general reserves, general balances and wipes them out. However, no one in the industry believes that that is what the government will do, that they will have to come up with something, whether they extend the statutory override or they do something else, like whether they allow for borrowing, whether they put it on the balance sheet. There's multiple options they could explore, but there are so many councils that will go into either Section 114 EFS when the statutory override ends, that they just can't do that, really. And I doubt that they will do that. And it's a systemic underfunding situation. And when you look at the Fair Funding Review, yes, there are going to be winners and losers, but the total amount of money in the pot coming from MHCLG going into local councils is not increasing. It's just changing the distribution. So whatever happens, there will be, if you took that statutory override off, people that need 114 EFS, which is why we just can't believe that by March 26th that's what will happen. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
you're getting there, Andy, but not quite, okay? What the question is, what happened in 2019? Okay, in 2018, it was there. In 2019, it wasn't there. So that's what I want to know. I just want to know what decision was made to change that policy. Maybe Tony can answer the question, because it's quite fundamental that why is it in the section 24? So the money that you're going to borrow, is it going to go towards that? Because if it is, that's wrong. Because you shouldn't be having to put that in this report. Mark at EY should be saying, oh, sorry, there's more complicated issues around this, where it's something that you can't do anyway. So this is what I'm trying to say. If it was okay in 2018, why is it not okay in 2025 to do the same thing?
Tony, do you want to come in at that point? And then
not particularly, if I'm honest, but I shall.
Thank you.
So I will look to members for their facial expressions, because we're straying into political decision-making territory here. Because there are the point at around 2018, there were a number of authorities approached about entering into safety valve agreements. So there were a number. We were one of them. There was a decision taken at the time to exercise that option. So we put together the arrangement that is in place. The decision as to, so other councils have used their general fund to pay off the deficit, or to pay off elements of the deficit as contributions towards their safety valve. Because this council believed that it isn't the council's responsibility, there was a decision not to do that, which is why the contributions that we were sort of making were capitalised in the way that Andy described. So there are an element of policy decisions, if you like, that are the administration of the council rather than the execution of officers' free will, if you like.
I think that's very helpful.
Sorry.
One follow-on.
I appreciate all of that. I understand the history and everything else. At this present moment in time, the government have renegade on that deal. That is a fact. Is it not or not? If it is, then why is it in here?
Tony.
Turn back on. So the 2 years ago, I can't quite remember when it, but the point at which they suspended was because there's quite a rigorous sort of review process of progress being made against the plans. At that point, there's interesting language. It was suspended, not that we didn't have a safety valve agreement. So, and one of the discussions that we've been having is, well, actually, if we're not out, then we're still in. So why have we not received the pay? And that is literally still an ongoing discussion. However, what we've done, rather than just wait for an answer on that, as Andy mentioned, the work that's been done within the team has reprofiled the in-year position in relation to the DSG, and it's getting lower and lower to a point where we've got a break-even point in year 27-28. And DFE have commended the council on that work, and my understanding, and I'll say that in air quotes because it's my understanding, not certain knowledge, but I'll find out, is that the reviewed plan that we've put to them is being put back to ministers for consideration of the payments being made to address what the shortfall is, because we haven't had it for the previous 2 years.
Thank you. Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Chair. So this is my contribution that I wanted to make in terms of this particular item on the Section 24. I have the honour, privilege, whichever way you decide it, of being the longest serving councillor in Hillingdon. So we've been around a few budgets and accounts over the years. And indeed, I've been a councillor when we previously had a Section 114 notice issued. And I just want to put on record, that was very premature. Just put that on record. It was turned out to be very premature. It's very easy to issue bits of paper and what have you, but then when the sums were done, it turned out to be premature. So I'm just putting that out there as a starter. However, there's no doubt Section 24 is an unusual and a fairly serious piece of documentation and legislation that as councillors and as a council we need to take very seriously. I understand that my Labour colleagues are desperately looking for the smoking gun, desperately seeking who to blame.
Just remember, Councillor Mills, we don't do politics in this committee, please. Something that we haven't done.
I accept that, Chair, but they are interlinked. There are 5 streams, as I see, to this Section 24. One about is the struggle to get a balanced budget, the effective controls on data, the issues about underfunding and the forthcoming spending review, issues about bad debt provision, but also prior year accounting adjustments. And trust me, I'm not going to go through all 5 because some of those really are political.
A question, if you get into the question.
The question is, I think it would be extremely helpful ahead of the council meeting that is going to get probably fairly heated over this item, if we could have more information in detail submitted to all council members about the prior year accounting adjustments, some of which Andy Godwin touched upon, and some of which are highly technical, but also what was the auditors at that time comments when those prior year adjustments were not made. So if we're making an adjustment now for 12 years ago, and the Cabinet report talks about £14 million, I just think this report is lacking the fact there's no reference to any of that. And I think it would be extremely helpful to have that documented and available for members to be able to make comment on, including why auditors did not apparently make comment at the time.
I think it's a fair question in the round. Andy, have you got a response to that? And then maybe if Mark's got anything he wants to add, just from his experience too, look.
Well, clearly we have the breakdown behind it, so I will work with services colleagues and make sure that we're open and transparent and that we get the information shared that is available to be shared. So, yeah.
Relevant information is not a bad thing, I think. Mark, did you have anything that you want to say from your perspective? You don't have to if there's nothing.
Just to emphasise, I guess, a couple of things that Andy's already said on these adjustments, because I think there was 3 main ones, and I would like to just note at this point that we have raised with officers that we would have liked an opportunity to understand the nature of these adjustments before the report that was issued that highlighted in the way it did, but that's not something I want to get into anymore here. In the context of the question around, I can't answer the account side, but the audit side that the member asked, I'd just like to highlight, I guess, one of them, the negative reserve balance, occurred during the period in which the financial statement opinion was displayed. So no audit opinion was issued in relation to it. Another one, as Andy has highlighted, dates back to, I think it was 2015-16, when the council had a different audit, and there is a level of reliance on opening balances that is necessary, but fully understand that, things do come out of the woodwork when auditors change and over time, etc. And the third item was, we actually are still seeking some further information to help us understand the nature of as well, so I can't offer an audit view on that. But my stand back in the context of the Section 24 report is, these adjustments did have a significant impact on the council's outturn for the previous financial year, and they pushed the reserves lower. But actually, if you ignore the impact of these, the council is still in a pretty difficult position and would be significantly overspent against its budget for the year and down on its reserves below the minimum level, even without these adjustments. So I think there are important points and worth discussion, but I don't think that they should become the sole focus. I think there is an underlying subject point which is larger
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Mills.
My next question, Chair, is about bad debt provision. Bad debt provision is a choice. Again, previously, we've had advice from auditors and our own accounts team that said that we were over-providing in our bad debt provision. And now officers have taken the opportunity to reassess that and seem to have swung back, the rubber band seems to have swung back the other way. Do you accept that you may now be over-cautious on the bad debt provision, because bad debt provision is a choice, not an absolute numerical number until it turns into a debt?
Andy, some insights onto the thinking there.
Yeah, sure. So that's not quite accurate. It's actually not. You don't need it until it's written off, not until it's a debt, because we provide against debt. But the bad debt provision is the judgment call of the Section 151. So I have taken that judgment call, and I'm happy with what I have judged to be a reasonable level of provision. Yes, it is based on future events, and therefore it's impossible to get it 100% right. A lot of what's driven this has been collection fund activity, so that actually council tax and business rates. So during the pandemic, we were unable to take people to court on the collection fund side, and once the courts reopened, we then started to take up that activity again. What's largely driving this on the general fund side is the court costs where we've taken people to court for council. It's mainly council tax. Within our budget strategy, you'll see that we budget for a 1% non-collection rate. We've been historically writing off roughly 0.5%, so we are behind on our write-offs, mainly as a result of catching up with pandemic activity related to debt. So what we need to do is we need to cleanse our debt position, which has already started. So we wrote off a significant amounts where we can no longer collect that debt in 24-25. So that activity has given me more of a basis to ensure that I've got a robustness on my estimate of the bad debt provision going forward into in the 24-25 accounts. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Councillor Burles.
Thank you, Chair. And put out my smoking gun now. But, okay, so to LBH officers, it seems to me that these statutory recommendations provide a sobering report on the failure of this council to accurately report the state of its finances. The next budget monitoring report, month 4, is due for publication by the 11th of September for Cabinet. Can you arrange for the month 3 budget monitoring report to be made available immediately, so that the council meeting on the 11th of September will be more informed about the current financial position? I should add that I'm advised it is highly irregular for any local authority not to provide full monthly detailed financial progress reports.
Andy.
I think so. I'd like to start with a correction on that point there, that it is not necessary to carry out monthly monitoring. A lot of councils have now moved to quarterly, so it's a risk-based approach. I think that given our financial position, it makes sense to do as regular as we can, so that when we recognise pressures emerging, we can take mitigating actions as soon as possible. So the month 2 report went in July. The month 4, as you say, will go in September's Cabinet. For month 3, we don't do an end-to-end review of our monthly monitoring position. We do a light touch monitoring, but in month 3 we are focused on preparing for the MTFS Star Chamber sessions, so that when we do our 26-27 budgets, it's part of that robustness. So where we've had those 3 stages in the roadmap to December Cabinet, we used intelligence from month 2, light touch review in month 3, just to make sure everything is still kind of on track, so that we can feed into the Star Chamber process. So month 3 is not a full end-to-end monitoring cycle, which is why the next monitoring cycle is month 4. Thank you.
I'll go, if it's a follow-on to this, then Councillor Higgins.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused. You're asking for Section 24, so why are you not doing it monthly? with all due respect, I mean, I just don't understand that. I'm a businessman, I take over a company, it's in financial things, I'm looking at every day, let alone everything. What the question is for me, has that, so you're you know, obviously now and present with what Matthew's doing, it's everything, we've put the bunting up and everything's fantastic. But the point is, at the end of the day, are you using that system to go back on the years, 4 years ago, so that you know exactly what it is, or are officers actually looking to see where the mistake was? Because it's really, really important. I appreciate we don't have to do it, but if you're in trouble and you're asking to borrow money, which I want to know, actually, there's another question, but I'll ask that later, you should be doing it monthly. I'm sorry, I don't understand what the resistance is here.
Andy.
It's not a resistance, it's a resourcing and what are our priorities. So we are focused on delivering an updated monitoring position to Cabinet. Cabinet do not meet in August, so there is no month 3 Cabinet position. And as you pointed out, we've got a strain between our monitoring position and our budget. So it's also a priority to make sure we're correlating our learning and experience through the monitoring process with our MTFS and budget build process. So we have taken the decision to prioritise preparing for the MTFF Star Chambers so that when we reach our December Cabinet position, we're in a better understanding on our robustness. We can give a greater level of certainty. But it's still going to be a future budget, which means there's always going to be a level of uncertainty in there. But what we're seeing, so if you take out those 14 million of accounting adjustments because they were one-off, and you look at the other underlying drivers of the pressures, which is kind of playing on what Mark mentioned earlier, it's mainly the demand areas. So we're seeing pressures on TA, which is a national issue, particularly in London and particularly for port authorities. So we need to understand the correlation in our budget models and what we're seeing on the ground, so that when we go into MTFS and when we go into month 4, month 5, month 6, that we can close off the gap between correlation on what happens on the ground and how we're modelling this. Similar thing plays out really across children's and across adults. So in adults, this is why it's one of the largest spend areas, is why we're doing this work where we are working with Matthew's team. We're getting behind that data. So we've now got this like a dashboard. The data flows into the dashboard, shows you all your live position on adults that the service can use to make service decisions and understand their position. We then take that very same data and we're dropping it into the financial modelling so that we can forward forecast for the future. So that way we can start to understand that correlation and close that gap so that we don't see the budget variances. So I see that as a key priority for our financial position, which is why I was happy to do a light touch month 3 monitoring position and focus on MTFS. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know who's going to answer this, but how many such Section 24 recommendations have you issued or seen, and what was the reason you decided to issue the recommendation, as this seems to be a retaliation of the advice provided previously?
Mark, I'm guessing, at least in part, that's one for you.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, in terms of the number of them, I think it is fair to say they are becoming more common. That there has been an upturn in them, certainly as far as EY is concerned. I can't speak necessarily for other audit firms, but they are still quite uncommon. So, it is a significant step, and it's not one that we take lightly. On the last point, I would just like to pick up on what the Councillor said there. The issues of the Section 24 recommendations is absolutely not a retaliation or any sort of measure like that. It is an expression of the concern that we have of your auditor about the position and the governance around it, as I touched on in the introduction earlier, and the need, or I guess the desire to bring those to the fore and to the attention of members and other interested parties. And the report sets out the factors that drove us to sort of the conclusions that we've reached around those. So, I don't know, Councillor, if that answers your questions, but if not, I'm happy to try again.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, happy with that. Just one more question. Could we invite the Cabinet member for Finance to attend our next meeting so that we can understand his position and his understanding of the reasons for these problems?
Lloyd, I'm not sure whether that's within the ability of the committee to arrange. I know we can bring officers along.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's perfectly within your ability to invite him.
So we could ask him if he wanted to attend, I guess. He has attended on a previous occasion from memory. Councillor Dennis, I know that you had a point, and then I think I need to sum this up a little.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a quick point, and then I have a question, and both of them related to the SIPFA quote on end of page 15, beginning of page 16 of the report provided by EY. I firstly just wanted to note about the low morale in the finance team that's stated there, and I just wanted to, I think the committee needs to recognise that, but also say that despite all our questions about what is happening on this very important issue, we do appreciate all the hard work that's being done, and it's, you know, these sorts of situations are stressful situations but important situations, so I just wanted to mention that. And my question is sort of a very big, broad brush question which goes towards the top of the quote, which says, the council has good services, low taxation and charging policies, and members are committed to their local area, but affordability to maintain this position and the current operating model is untenable. And for me, that is the big, massive thing here. I mean, we talked about the grip and what's going on. I mean, do we think that we're now on the journey towards having that tenable model, financial model, because that's what we need to do, because the first bit of all that stuff does not matter if we run out of money.
Matthew.
I'll cover the first part. So the question around staff morale. So that's going into the detail of the report, so well done. So I think we also need to recognise that these reports are in the past. So when we're banding around statements around data quality, for example, that's not the organisation I see with poor data quality. I see an organisation that's made massive leaps and bounds over the last 12 months about how we're automating our data. We've just talked about debt, for example. So we're automating all of our debt into singular dashboards, which we own, which we've created, and we've got a single view of our residents and our household. So we may look at financial data, but to give statements that our data quality is in a poor place, I don't agree. I think we're using our data much better than most other local authorities at the moment. Staff morale is, I think I presented at the last committee, we've had our staff survey. Actually, the staff morale in finance, that statement doesn't bear out in terms of our staff survey results, and I've committed to come back to the next committee to go through the staff survey results. It's always a tricky time. Our staff survey results have significantly improved from last year, which I'm very proud of. We're very proud of as an organisation, but we recognise there is still more to do. I think the most pertinent point, and one that I think we've made across this committee, is we've got a plan. Staff morale is attached to the fact is we've got a coherent plan to make improvements. We are being more transparent than we ever have before. We've got investment to make the improvements we need to improve how we do our finances, and the team in finance are part of that as well and are involved in a day-to-day basis in doing that. They feel part of the solution, and that's empowering for staff as we work with them to co-create some of the opportunities. They're working with Andy and his team. We've got a new Section 151 starting on Monday, and we've got, I think we've got a really good plan to improve both our finance services, the way we manage our finances, and our organisation. Understood, we've got a difficult financial position, but again, we've got plans to rectify that, and we have had for a long time. So I can sit as a Chief Operating Officer saying that I've got confidence in the plans we've got as an organisation, and we are very aware of where we are. We're not hiding them, we're bringing them out on the table. That's why we're at the committee tonight, and we've known about them, but we recognise that also that we can course correct on a regular basis as well, because in any local authority, given being a port authority, we're going to come up with problems. And Andy made the really pertinent point is sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, and it's really important that we've done the work to look at the demand modelling, really understand our services, really think about our savings over the next 3 years rather than living in the moment. And that's the coherent plans we've got as an organisation to drive it forward. So there's not bad staff morale. We've got the plans to do better budget monitoring, and we incrementally improve it both in our systems, our processes, our documentation, how we're working within the organisation, and we strive to improve that on a month-by-month, day-to-day basis. So that's where we are as an organisation, and again, as one council working as a corporate management team with Cabinet, we do that jointly as well.
Councillor Dennis, did you have a follow-on to that? Or
Not particularly, just but the tenable point. So thank you for that. And that's I realised I asked it the last question. I know it's coming back, but it's very good to hear actually that the latest data shows improvements in that, because obviously you do your best work when you're satisfied with what you're doing and you're happy. So I look forward to hearing more about that. But just about the sort of my major question really, which is, you know, the first stuff, which is all great in the quote I wrote is fantastic, but it just does not work unless we have a tenable model. Are we confident in the future we're going to have a tenable model? I'm partly looking...
Andy,
yeah,
one for you, I think, yeah. Then we'll have Councillor Higgins, then I'll ask a question.
Yeah, sure, thank you. So there are a number of issues that are driving the pressures in Hillingdon that aren't really within the kind of normal bounds, we say, of how a local authority, what we should be picking up in terms of our roles and responsibilities. So there is, I think, called the New Burdens Doctrine. So when other government departments impose burdens on us and pressures, they should be funded for us. So one of the big things is the Port Authority point. So we are in conversation with the Home Office around how we believe that they are not funding the burdens that they have imposed on us through their decisions. So firstly, we are in negotiation, well, we're talking to them to try and secure additional grant funding, recognising our costs and our unique position. So that will obviously change the balance of that untenable kind of balance. And the other thing is the fair funding review. So government haven't told us yet what our fair funding allocations will be from 27-28 onwards, with the next settlement being a 3-year period. So there are a number of different models out there that have kind of attempted to use the government's consultation papers to estimate this, and have largely converged by the time the consultation closed. We are using the London Council's model, so that clearly demonstrates that we are circa 50 million short on funding per annum. So depending on how this plays out through the consultation responses, and by the time this actually gets issued as a provisional settlement, and depending on how the government choose to transition us to that number, clearly we're arguing that if this is going to be the fair funding settlement, that in order for it to be fair, it should be paid up front, and Hillingdon residents shouldn't have to pay a transition period. There's a lot of unknowns on the funding horizon at the moment, but this clearly demonstrates that Hillingdon have been underfunded. So it's not that the council hasn't been well managed and service delivery hasn't been well managed. It's that we're not receiving the correct level of funding that the government have now not quite themselves recognised, but their paperwork and their review kind of suggests this. So I think that to stray into tenable, untenable at this stage, we need to see what that looks like. Then we need to play that through the MTFS. What are our current challenges? So again, putting that 14 million of accounting adjustments to one side. When you look at our in-year pressures on our service delivery, that's clearly tracking well below the level of funding that the government is saying that we as an authority should be receiving. So I think we just need to let this play out, but at the moment we are putting pressure on the government to recognise that we are underfunded, and therefore that should come to us in the way of grant funding in the settlement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins.
I've got so many questions, but I'm going to keep it very brief. First of all, obviously, both of us are reading the report from EY. It's saying things that we need to have a clear understanding of our current financial position. Matthew's just stated that he has some ideas of figures. Why they're not in the report? Don't understand that. How much are we going to borrow? That's another question. And what are the conditions of a Section 24 when you borrow, and how does that financially a burden on our residents? Those questions haven't, they really need to be answered in this report, and they're not. Can you give me some sort of understanding?
A little bit of clarity, perhaps, Andy.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. So a Section 24 statement has got nothing to do with borrowing. Their recommendations. The way the borrowing would play out is through the council. We outed in the July Cabinet report that we are in conversation with MHCLG around exceptional financial support. It's that can trigger borrowing. So we are looking at, like I mentioned, the grant funding on the whole new burdens and the way that's played out with the Home Office decisions and how that's impacting on us. But it's the EFS conversation. So we are applying for exceptional financial support. Should the government agree that, then we have multiple choices in how we fund it. If you apply for our upfront at the beginning of the year, you can look at council tax uplift above referendum. Clearly, we're not in that position because we are mid-year. You can look at capital receipts to fund any EFS offer, and you can look at borrowing. But even on the borrowing front, you don't have to necessarily borrow the amount of your EFS, because what exceptional financial support and capital direction does is it allows you to take revenue expenditure, transfer it into a capital programme, and therefore you're funding it through methods that you're allowed to fund capital through. So it's not, EFS isn't a borrowing in itself, it's a mechanism to transfer revenue to capital.
Sorry, excuse my ignorance. So why are we doing a Section 24 if we can just borrow the money?
Section 24 has got nothing to do with...
So I thought the way that I read it, maybe I'm wrong, forgive me if I am, that Section 24 has to be established, which then goes to the Secretary of State. From the Secretary of State, then they gives a permission for us to go to borrow money.
No, that's not correct.
So then why are we doing Section 24?
We don't issue the Section 24, EY do.
Okay. So that's the question to you then, Mark, is that if as we are a well-run council, why can't we just say, right, we're going to borrow the money? Instead of you putting a report here that's quite it's quite scary, I think, for this council, considering our past history, that already we've picked up the DSG element of it. That's not quite right. So is there not a way that we could turn around and say that we're doing all the digital stuff, and that's going to make it come online better, that would give us an opportunity then to just borrow money?
So I think it's worth if I just explain what this report is and the powers that auditors have. So committee members will be aware that as part of each annual audit we express a commentary on the council's various money arrangements, and as part of that, if we identify anything that we consider to be a significant weakness in the arrangements, we are required under the Code of Audit Practice, published by the National Audit, to report that fact. That Code of Audit Practice also establishes a number of what are referred to as additional auditor powers, one of which is the ability to issue Section 24 recommendations under the legislation, and the Code provides some further guidance around it. That is effectively an extension of the value for money work that we do as part of our audit. It is not a direct way of getting in or out of the financial position of the council or how the council resolves that. It's not directly linked to the council's ability to borrow money as you might do, or any other step to resolve the financials. So in terms of why we as an auditor have taken a step of issuing it, that's what I tried to set out in my commentary, which is actually, we previously reported significant weakness in the council's arrangements. The fact pattern, as we set it out within the report, concerns us sufficiently that actually we think we need to go a step further than that and use our additional auditor powers to highlight the significance of our concerns. And to be clear, the position of the council financially is obviously a core focus of the commentary, but our concerns are on the council's arrangements for managing that, not the position in of itself. The Section 24 report is not about the council's reserves are X and they're going to run out in Y point or reduce to Y point at said time. It is about the council's arrangements for managing its financial position, and that is why we have taken the step. Because while the council is taking some good steps in the financial modernisation programme, and widely agreed that the committee has been talked through are steps of that, they are in the early phases. They have taken a little while to get going from the point at which concerns were emerging. If we go back to sort of 12, 18 months ago, the council was introducing the staff chambers, etc., and talking to the committee about the fact that, they were the steps that were being taken to address the weaknesses that have been identified. And if we fast forward on, then a different plan emerged because actually those steps didn't achieve the desired outcome. And that is why we can kind of move towards the step we have with the Section 24 report.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to kind of give my view and then perhaps we'll move on to the next agenda item. I actually welcome this report from EY. It is a point in time and time has moved on subsequent to the report. It's one of the clearest reports I've read, and we can quibble over some of the history and the what ifs and buts, but it's one of the clearest reports I've read while sitting on this committee, and it leaves no doubt to my mind that action is sorely needed. And the word that you've used, Mark, and officers have used today, action is needed at pace. And it's that pace bit that slightly concerns me about whether the range of changes that need to be progressed, and let's not underestimate those, will proceed at the pace that's required. And, that's something we have touched upon in general during these conversations, but from a risk perspective, not getting this done quickly enough feels like a key, if not the key, risk to me on this. Matthew, it might be an unfair question, but I'll ask it nevertheless. Are you confident that the plans that you're working with today will deliver at the pace that's needed to fix this?
So I'm going to say yes, because I'm always optimistic about where we are. So I think it's not defined what the necessary pace is. So I think it's always difficult to judge what's the right thing to do when we're looking at things like doing our statement of accounts. Some councils publish them really quickly, some don't publish them at all. We are in a position, for example, is doing it quickly and doing it at pace wouldn't necessarily be the right thing. Doing it in the right way is absolutely what we want to do as an organisation. So, picking up some of the mistakes we've made in the past, rectifying some of those, going on an improvement journey. We are working at the right pace, recognising, I think, at the same time we're running a complex organisation with huge demand pressures. So we're trying to juggle at the moment of how we're managing the budget for this year, how we're picking up, closing the accounts for last year, and also preparing for the next three years. So, as leaders in the organisation, we always have to get the balance right, and this isn't the only thing we're doing as an organisation. So we've got, significant transformation programs in what we're doing around digitals, purchasing care homes. We've got a big savings program of £38 million, so we can't take our eye off the ball. So I would say we're working at the right pace for the organisation that's complicated, that's dealing with, a lot of transformation, a lot of projects, and we're making the right representations with the government, with the LGA. So I think it's really important that we're not just doing this ourselves, we're bringing in the right support. So we could have rushed into this. We've brought in Grant Thornton, we're working with the LGA. We've also got additional support from other organisations, and I feel confident that we've got the right scrutiny as well, because also I think we can, you can talk about going at pace, but there should also be the check and the balancing as committee members fed back is, going to select committees, coming to the audit committee, spending our time explaining where we are is an important part of our journey. And I think pace is, and I don't want to get into semantics, is this organisation is forever changing. Sure, we've got financial issues and we've got plans to rectify those, but we're also dealing with multiple issues on a daily basis in our community, within the organisation, so we've got to deal with those. And I think the robust plan, we've set the timescales, we've set the plan, we review them, we've got the governance and the scrutiny to make sure that we've got our eye on the ball, and with the chief executive and the leader sitting above all of those, I think we've got the right governance in place. So I feel confident on the pace, and going back to, we've got EY helping us and auditing us at the same time, is we've got the right challenge, and actually we're listening at the moment, because we've got to take that advice from our partners, LGA, the government, of where we are. And I feel confident that all the feedback we've had from the LGA and the government is we're doing most of the right things, and we can always accelerate pace. But actually we're going at the right pace to fix the issues in enough detail that we're fixing them over the medium term. We're not just fixing them for this financial year. We're setting up the organisation to be financially sustainable, and that's the last point. Is the pertinent point is we want to create a financially sustainable organisation, so we need to work at the right pace to make sure it's sustainable over a medium term, not just balances this year.
And you're absolutely right, forgive me, pace is but one element amongst several that you'll be juggling, no doubt. I do have a final question. It's around the confidence of the financial savings. One of the things that did leap out at me from EY's report was how we had previously had not always realised the level of savings that were expected. Why is it going to be better this time?
I'll get Andy to do the numbers, and I'll do the process. So in terms of the process, so we've listened. I think I'll go back to what I said before. Is we've listened to and we've addressed some of the mistakes we've had in the past. So we've put much better governance and much better scrutiny around our savings. So both in setting the savings, but also now we have a MTFS savings app, because I do digital stuff, is an accountable framework that is managed through the organisation, that goes from the officer that is responsible for that savings. It's signed off by the corporate director, it's scrutinised by the chief executive and the section 151, and it's also shared with cabinet members. That is monitored on a monthly basis, so we've got the right checks and balances in terms of where we are against the savings. Now, we have to save £38 million this year. If you go back to the month 2 cabinet report, we're making very good progress compared to the previous financial years of the level of savings. Now, there are always challenges with savings in terms of the timescales, the ever-changing organisation, the ever-changing economy, but I think we're on top of that, and as part of the Star Chamber processes, as having sat in one of those today, we line by line scrutinising every single savings, as Tony holds us to account on the delivery of those savings, as the leader holds Tony to account on those, and that is part of the cabinet report. There's probably not a lot more we could do in terms of quality assuring that, and that will be part of scrutiny via the select committees as well. So the month 2 report says I've got greater confidence that we will make the level of savings more than we'll, but I think it's also unrealistic to say we will make all of the £38 million worth of savings, because they are substantial and most organisations don't, but we will deliver a greater percentage than we ever have before.
Thank you. Andy, did you want to just follow on with?
I think one of the things that we've put into the cabinet reporting as well recently is that we now have the column in there for written out, so you can actually see we're being very open and transparent around where savings can't be delivered and where they are being written out from the budget. You'll see in February's budget strategy report in the MTFS that we wrote out, I think something like 4.7 million in savings. So we're being very open and transparent now about how we are delivering our savings, and recognising that, as Matthew said, there's always a changing environment, changing economics. So you can see where we are having to write savings out, but if you look at that number as a percentage of the saving that we've actually put forward, it's very small. So in 25-26, we're not looking to write that much out. We're actually doing really well on the delivery programme, so I think it's something that council and officers should be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you both very much indeed. I'm going to move on. I'm just going to apologise. I think this will be the first audit committee where we've not delivered to pretty much the time deadline. We will continue, and I apologise for the late running of the committee today. I think it's down to the nature of the business. We will proceed if we can have very short context briefings from presenters and focused questions.
Before we move on, can I just, it would be remiss, and I hope I'm not jumping on Ryan's toes, there's 2 recommendations in the covering report which do need adopting, and if you wish to invite Councillor Gallard, you'll need a further resolution to do that. I will point out, of course, as Mark quite rightly pointed out at the beginning of this whole discussion, this is a report to full council, where Councillor Gallard will be in attendance, and I'm sure will be held to robust scrutiny at that point.
Okay, well, we certainly note the report. Colleagues, is there a general move to invite Councillor Goddard to the next meeting, which is in several months' time, or do you want to wait to see what happens at the next meeting. Councillor Dennis.
I think it's good to have the Cabinet member responsible here, so even if the debate moves on post-council meeting, I think it would be useful to have Councillor Goddard here to question this.
Yeah, great.
Okay, happy that we invite him. Thank you very much for the suggestion. Let's move on. Agenda item 7, the external audit update. Pete, did you want to introduce this and then we'll hand over to Mark? That's the way we've done it previously.
Yes, certainly, Chair. Just very briefly, there are 4 things in this report, because a number of the items we've already been talking about. It starts by giving just a brief update on where we are across the country on audits. There were 216 councils with disclaimer audits, and there is a NAO paper coming out in June, more will come out in the fall, on how we get back to normal audits. The second item is that we have both in February and May had the 23-4 audit results report. What this report now contains is the final audit report, which is the 23-4, which is from those audit results reports. It notes that although we didn't at that time have any statutory recommendations, those 7 recommendations in that report are part of the GRIP programme. Third thing is we have the audit plan for 24-5. 2 items in there are additional. One is looking at the implementation of Oracle going from the old to the new system, and also the government's risk linked to capacity financing, which I think we've discussed quite a bit already. And finally, then the accounts themselves. We are going through an enhanced process this year with the accounts, given everything else that's gone on and the things that have been identified. We had draft accounts in a position where we could give them to Grant Thornton to do a review last week. They've come back with a number of items they want us to update. We're in the process of doing that and expect probably to be completed the process and issue those draft accounts in the next week to 8 days.
Thanks, Pete. Mark, did you want to talk us through at a high level the plan, or the update rather?
Yes, certainly. So just in terms of the auditor's annual report on the 23-24 audit, so just very briefly, this is a report that we are required to issue in a code of auditing practice. Due to the timing of your audit and significant delays, etc., actually everything that is in there has previously been through the committee, either as part of the audit results report or as part of the value for money commentary that was issued. So there is nothing new in that report, and on that basis I intend to move straight on unless anyone has any questions on it. What we've then presented is the audit planning report.
I think we have just, sorry Mark, if I can just pause you there. We have one question from Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Chairman. All the items are shown as read. Can you advise if you believe that lack of capacity in the Council's finance team has been addressed?
So the capacity itself was not, I think, the main issue with the ability to complete the audit work in the previous year. I think a combination of the quality of data that they were working through, which was pulled out of the value for money weakness in the report, was a bigger contributing factor, as was the implementation of the backstop data that we previously talked to me through, effectively putting in end data which the proceeds had to be completed. After they come on in the next report, you will see that we are pulling out the capacity of the finance team as a bit more of a risk for 24-25, and that probably tells you that actually it maybe hasn't been fully addressed, but I can talk about that a little bit more in the presentation of that report.
Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to, you just mentioned 24-25 report. Has it been drafted as yet? And I know that you raised this aspect of the article system upgrade. Can you update us, please?
Chair, I can update on that.
Thank you.
25, we've got a draft set of accounts which is going through final quality assurance at the moment, and it's part of the enhanced quality assurance that we mentioned in the GRIP report with Grant Thornton. They've come back with a number of items. We are looking at those and updating at the moment so that the draft accounts can be issued.
Thanks, Pete. Mark, over to you again.
Thank you, Chair. So the second report we've got here is our audit planning report for the 24-25 audit. This was issued little over a month ago, and things have moved on. So if the committee can bear with me, I'll talk to the current situation rather than the report as it's presented in front of you. Just by way of background, the committee will remember that the 23-24 audit was concluded shortly after the backstop date that the legislation imposed, just due to the need to finalise the public inspection period. The Council, as Peter described, is taking time to ensure the quality of the draft financial statements for 24-25 are there, and that it is a good quality financial statements to prove as a starting point for the audit. That does mean that there has been some delay to the commencement of the audit. Over the summer, there has also been guidance issued by the National Audit Office on the rebuilding of assurance. So this is about how the Council, and indeed the rest of the sector, moves from the position you had in the prior year, which was your audit opinion being disclaimed and no opinion and assurance offered, back towards a clean opinion that you would have had in previous years before disclaimers and the backstop legislation became an issue. That guidance came out relatively late in the audit cycle from our perspective, and it came out over the summer once year-end audit work was starting at some councils. So our approach for the current year is not to seek to rebuild assurance from earlier years, but to focus on getting assurance over the transactions in the current year and the balance of the previous year-end, effectively giving us a more solid basis to try to rebuild in the following year once we've worked through that guidance and actually understood what it means for audit procedures. That was what was set out kind of quite early on, and our engagement partner, Stephen, who the committee will see in previous meetings, is also our head of public sector audit, wrote to all of our local government clients early on in the summer, setting out that that was our approach, but also that we have a backstop date in legislation for 24-25 audits of the 27th of February, so by that date all audit opinions by the legislation should be issued. There is a finite ability of auditors and indeed finance teams to support the audit process ahead of that date, and therefore some prioritisation of resources is necessary. We set out a number of criteria that we were going to use to inform our prioritisation for the deployment of our resources, namely being timely publication of the draft financial statements, initial checks on them indicating that they are of a high quality, and our confidence based on knowledge of the individual audited bodies and previous audit cycles in their ability to support the audit process. I think it's fair to say our conversations with officers around this have been productive, but recognise that actually the Council was not meeting those criteria. And at this point I would just like to reflect a little bit on a couple of discussions that we previously had and say we have had some difficult discussions with officers, both around the financial statement audit and the value for money in the Section 24 report. But I would also like to put on the record that I think those discussions have been in the right manner, and we have a good relationship with officers through that, and I think that's an important context to bear in mind as we move through the audit cycle of 24-25. Where that leaves us is, as we've just had, the Council hasn't actually published their draft statement for 24-25 yet. The deadline in legislation for that was the 30th of June. Based on the fact that we were advised by officers nice and early that there was going to be a delay, and we don't necessarily disagree with that insofar as ensuring the quality of the accounts is probably preferable to rushing them out and being of a poor quality just to arbitrarily hit a deadline. But it does have an ongoing impact on our ability to start our audit procedures and work through the audit. So the audit timeline is set out within the report, but that is an old timeline that we are no longer working to. What we're now aiming to do is start the detailed audit procedures at the start of October, so that gives a little bit more time for management to finalise the financial statements and get them ready for audit, and then some of the supporting working papers and schedules that we need for audit procedures as well. Carrying those audit procedures through into January with a view to concluding the audit late January, probably taking the audit results report to the February audit committee for formal signing of the kind of statement of accounts by Andy and by Stephen on the audit opinion in February ahead of that 27th of February backstop date. In order to work to that timetable, we have agreed with officers that we will remove PPE from the scope of our planned audit procedures this year. So ordinarily PPE will be one of the biggest items on the balance sheet, and there is a lot of audit effort that goes into the testing of those, and indeed a lot of time from the finance team supporting the audit work around those and the audit queries. We feel that time is better spent on other balances. PPE is not a difficult one from the rebuilding of assurance perspective, and therefore there are other balances that can set us up in a better place looking to move towards a cleaner opinion in future years. Irrespective of that decision, it was our expectation that the your opinion for 24-25 would be disclaimed as a consequence of the disclaimer in the prior year and the lack of rebuilding of assurance over that period, so the pervasive impact of not having assurance over the opening balances. But that decision does mean that we are going to be in a position where actually we wouldn't be able to issue an opinion even if we had the prior year assurances, because we wouldn't have that assurance over PPE. That said, as I say, I think it is the right decision to allow us to focus both our capacity and the finance team capacities on rebuilding those areas that are going to be the best and most beneficial in terms of getting back to a clean audit opinion over time. So in terms of our audit approach for this year, we had identified a number of audit risks that we'll be working through as part of our audit procedures. I won't dive into a lot of detail up in the report comes from there. The one I will highlight, which Pete touched on, is the implementation of Oracle Fusion as a new IT system. As has been highlighted within the Section 24 report, the Council has had some challenges around that, though we would draw a distinction, and I know Matthew would draw a distinction in comments already between the underlying transactional processing function of Oracle and the EPM module that was used for budget monitoring and reporting. We've involved our IT audit specialists to look at that system change, so that is involved with both the mechanical, does the balances in the new system agree to what was in the closing system at the point they closed. That work is complicated by the fact that the transition happened in stages for the council, so normally with a system upgrade, you would draw a line in the sand and almost stop using the old system at a date and the following day start using the new system. The council did it in more of a phased transition, so there are multiple dates which we need to check that data integrity across, and then that impacts on the volume of work required. But our specialists are working through that work over the summer with support from Pete and his team, and that work is well progressed. The rest of our risks are similar to the prior year, though as I've highlighted, PPE and the valuation of council dwellings are two of those risks, and now our audit procedures around those are not something we are planning to follow through on. Our materiality level is similar to the prior year and set out in the report. And then in terms of our value for money work, we identified two significant weaknesses in the prior year, being financial sustainability and the quality of the data of the council. We've identified both as significant risks for the current year, so that's a risk with a significant weakness. However, given the factors set out in our Section 24 report and the fact that we felt it appropriate to issue the Section 24 report, it is almost certain that we will conclude them as significant weaknesses for 24-25 as well. We also have an additional significant risk this year around the capacity of the finance team. So within the quality of data risk in the prior year, we did include some comments that the finance team has some capacity challenges, so that was making it a key point of the risk. We do think some of the challenges that have emerged in 24-25, particularly around Oracle EPM and the need for additional manual intervention from finance staff to help the rest of the business due to the difficulties getting reliable information out of the system, that the capacity of the finance team is a specific challenge and a specific risk area. We haven't formed a conclusion on that yet. That is something we will be looking to see as we work through our audit procedures, the ability to support the audit, the production of the financial statements, etc. And we'll report back to the committee as part of the audit results report on our conclusion in respect to that risk. The report does also highlight that whilst we haven't identified a risk of significant weakness in relation to the Oracle system, we were wrapping it up as part of the quality of the council's information. Based on the work we've been doing around the Oracle transition since then, we are going to recognise a risk of significant weakness specifically around the Oracle transition and how that was managed as a programme. We haven't formed a conclusion on that, so please don't take that as a saying there is a weakness. We are just recognising a risk of a weakness at this stage, and we'll be doing further work as part of that IT transition piece with our IT specialists to understand that and form a conclusion on the risk. I'm happy to draw a line there, Chair, and take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Mark. Councillor Bells.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, really. I'm not an accountant and an auditor or anything like that, but on the balances issue, the closing and the opening balances, how confident are you in the figures that you're working with? You did touch on it earlier in your speech, but can you just go back over that again for us, please?
So confidence is a difficult thing to express because we didn't complete all of our audit procedures over the prior year balances. What we did do was enough work to say, well, for the stuff we looked at, we didn't find anything material, but we didn't look at everything, and therefore we can't sit here and give you assurance that there isn't a misstatement within balances. What I'm referring to when I say the assurance going through is because you don't have that assurance over the position at the 31st of March 2024, there are some balances in the financial statements where effectively you need that assurance to conclude the 31st of March 2025 because effectively it builds within your movements in terms of how you get your assurance. So at some point we need to rebuild that assurance over the movements that took place since the previous clean audit opinion. That work hasn't happened, so I can't express a view on it. So what I can say is I haven't seen an indicator there is a material issue, but that doesn't mean there isn't one, it doesn't mean there is. But on top of that, because you don't have that confidence of the opening position, even if you get confidence in the closing position at the 31st of March 2025, that you don't know whether the movement in the year that flows through the income statement side of the financial statement is correct. Very quick example, if you had an opening balance of 10 million and a closing balance of 12, your financial statements will show an in-year gain of £2 million. But if the prior year balance should have been 8 million, you don't know that because you don't have assurance over it, then your in-year movement would be 4 million, not 2, and you don't know that. So you still have an assurance gap on the in-year movement, even if you're testing the balance at the end of the current year. And that's where we end up with the overall opinion being disclaimed for the current period. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. I think it does. Quick question for Pete before I hand over to Councillor Nelson. Pete, when are we hoping to break out of this disclaimed opinion cycle from your perspective? Or Mark? any of you?
Peter, if you want to come in after. From an audit perspective, it's a difficult one to answer because as auditors, we are still working through the guidance of what rebuilding looks like and what is involved in that. It will be a multi-year process. What we would expect to happen over time is you move first from a disclaimed audit opinion to some form of limited or qualified opinion. So effectively we can express an opinion other than in relation to a small number of balances which maybe have more complexity to them. And then over time you will move that off and lift it. The most complex area and the most difficult area to rebuild is reserves. We can test the balance sheet balances, your assets and liabilities, and get comfortable over those that are reported day, and then you've got that assurance carried into the following year, and that's what we're aiming to do in the current year's audit, other than for PPE. The income and expenditure happens in year, and that can be tested each year. It's the cumulative impact on reserves, and particularly the classification of amounts between reserves, so where, for example, councils moved amounts between capital reserves and pension reserve and the general fund, earmarked reserves, and all the different movements that go on there. That's the real difficult area for rebuilding assurance, and we're working through it. The timeline will vary from council to council. I think the most optimistic ones is we'll probably be looking to get there for 26-27 in the simplest cases. Hillingdon is not in that position, partly because of the ongoing challenges in delivery of the current year's audit and not being able to complete all of the procedures there. So my guess would be 27-28 at the earliest, but it may well be later. We'll need to see how subsequent audits go.
Thank you. Anything to add, Pete?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd echo what Mark's saying. I think the other thing you've got to put into account as well is there's 116 councils doing this process at the moment, and it's a capacity issue for everyone as well. And the government needs to actually give us real good guidance. They're yet to do that in terms of opening balances. And so until we get that, it's very difficult to accelerate anything.
Okay, thank you. Understood. Councillor Nelson.
Just quickly, can Ernest Young provide details of how the audit has been progressing and details any significant problem encountered so far?
Other than the work around the Oracle IT transition, audit work hasn't really taken place yet. So we've completed our audit planning, and that involves the report that you have in front of you here. But the audit procedures take place after the draft account is available for audit, and at the moment the draft account is still not finalised, so we haven't been able to commence our audit procedures.
Thanks for the update. Okay, I think there are no further questions on the plan and the update to the plan that you provided. Thank you very much for that, Mark, and we'll move on through the agenda. Agenda item 8, the Audit Committee Annual Report, and you're kindly going to introduce that for us, Claire. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So this is the Audit Committee's Annual Report. This summarises the work of this committee during 24-25. This is your report. It is drafted based on the things that were presented within the meetings last year, but in terms of any of the opinions, that is for you to decide. Obviously they're written saying that internal audit is amazing, but feel free to disagree. They are your opinions, it is your report, so if there is any changes, please let me know. This will be finalised and then will be presented to Council.
So, Councillor Bills, any comments or observations?
Yeah, I've just got one. I have to express concern that the draft report doesn't reflect on the failure of the Council to provide accurate accounts to this committee. I believe that needs to be highlighted. I think it's very serious.
I think there's a slight sort of omission, isn't there, at the end of section E on page 4, where we've not said that we're satisfied or happy or overjoyed, and I think from my perspective that's the reason why. I'm happy, it is our report, so if there's amendments that we seek, I'm very happy that we consider them and pass these on to Claire, of course. Sorry, Councillor Nelson.
Specifically in the 2024 account were delivered late. The account for that year and early years includes figures which we now know to be wrong, and this committee failed to be aware of. We were not provided until now with the Internal Audit Directorship Governance Report, which would have raised concerns about the ability of the Council to accurately report details of its financial position. Can an amendment to our report be made to demonstrate that we are not just a paper dragon?
It's our report. We can make whatever amendments we wish. So perhaps if there was a form of words you would like to see included in the report and the place where you think that should be entered, I'd be very happy for that to be circulated and considered by committee. Councillor Dennis.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously drafting in committee is famously camel creating. Camels do have some purpose in deserts. So I think, is it a case that when do we have to submit this report by? Because obviously, colleagues have raised questions about can we sort of repurpose some of it, but obviously I don't think drafting right here is the best thing.
I don't want it done here.
Yeah,
no, circulate the comments.
So if we circulate the comments, and how do we agree them? Would we agree them at the next meeting, or...?
What's the deadline for this, Claire? Remind me.
I don't actually know. I guess it would go to Council when it's ready.
Finished. I don't think that there was ever a fixed deadline for this. So, okay, how about this as the way forward? Comments on the report, maybe direct to Claire. Claire can then circulate them for discussion. We'll get feedback back by whatever dates you suggest, Claire, and then take it from there. Perhaps a revised version for the next committee, or circulate outside of the committee if needed. Okay. Colleagues, happy with that as a way forward? Thank you. I'm broadly satisfied with the report, and thank you very much for taking the steps to get this to us in this format. Thank you. Agenda item 9, risk management and strategic risk reports. Claire.
So this is our risk report as at the end of June. So at the end of June there was 256 risks on our operational risk register, of which 28 were red. We had 5 red risks added during that quarter. These related to safer staffing and 4 relating to housing, which was following an internal review by the service. We also had 3 red risks removed. These were all reduced to amber. They're outlined in section 3 of the report. This was due to the ongoing actions that had been taken by the services, and they were no longer red rated. One red-rated risk has actually been closed following this report. That related to the housing regulator report, as that has now been completed. So we've taken off the risk that potentially would be negative, because it was, of course, positive. There was 4 red-rated risks overdue for review at the end of the quarter. These have all been addressed post-quarter end. That was just a timing issue, especially due to sickness for one of the risk owners. As at this morning, there was only 2 red risks overdue for review, but these were only overdue for review by 3 days. Overall, at the end of June, we had 17 overdue for review and only 2 weren't scored. There was 115 without actions, but that is an improvement from the previous quarter, and that's something that we're working on. That was all I was going to say on the risk report.
Thank you. Councillor Mills.
Thank you. This, of course, is a follow-on from the introduction of a new way of doing our risk reporting. And last time this came up when I was here, we discussed about the ownership issues and the recognition from within departments that it's actually their responsibility and not your good selves to come up with a list. Is this report reflecting the ownership has picked up and that there is much better understanding of risk management across the board? Or would you, and I expect you almost certainly say yes, as an internal auditor want corporate directors to crack the whip even harder in 1 or 2 areas?
I would say for June and, ongoing, I do not chase people to update their risk registers. This is entirely down to people taking ownership. There are still things like putting actions against them. There are still things overdue for review. But the fact that we only have 2 and they're only 3 days because of timing, I don't expect people to be on it the minute that they get the alert through from the system. It is fine. People have busy jobs. But historically, we would see things, outstanding for ages. So I'd say it's really positive. I don't chase people. I get people coming to me asking for training. So I'm actually doing training later next week. So there is actually a lot of kind of proactiveness. I don't chase people anymore. So yeah, it's really good.
Thank you. Follow on from Matthew there.
Yeah, just in terms of the governance, Councillor Mills, so we now take a performance and risk report to the corporate management team on a monthly basis, so the Chief Exec can hold corporate directors to account, and also we check within that, have the risks been completed to time. So as part of the GRIP, we have more robust governance and oversight as a corporate management team right the way through to senior management team, so that is the directorate leadership team. So both Claire and from a performance perspective attend those on a monthly basis to check that's also done at a directorate level, so we have more robust processes, and we also have the system in place that's been embedded over a period of time, so that's why Claire no longer has to go and chase everybody and can do more value add tasks. So I feel we're in a much better position over the last 6 months and the last year, and also we can improve how we do things moving forward, because yes, we're constantly striving to improve how we do things, both the governance, the quality, but also making sure we're fundamentally focusing on not just filling in the system. It's about mitigating the risks and being more active about the management of those within the organisation.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions about the risk report or the update that Claire's given on this? Thank you. Yep, onwards.
So attached to that is the strategic risk report. This looks slightly different. The content is the same, but the reason it looks slightly different is because this is now included within the CMT performance and risk report that Matthew just mentioned and stole my thunder. This is part of our work to align our performance report, our KPIs, all of the new dashboards and performance data that we have around forecasting. There is a lot of work around Power BI, linking in live feeds of data and performance KPIs. That is then aligned to the strategic risks, so we can really see actually the actions we're taking. Are they addressing the key performance indicators? So that's why it looks slightly different, that it's just the cover pages from that more kind of detailed report, making sure that there is one sort of single document, single point of truth. You're getting the same data that CMT is getting on a monthly basis. So yes, that's why it looks slightly different, but the content is still the same, and should hopefully still cover everything.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any comments or observations about the strategic risk report? I like it, thank you, it's a good update. Okay. I'm getting nods, well done, thank you very much indeed. We'd like to kind of double tap you, so to speak. So agenda item 10 is also yours. It's a triple tap this time. Internal audit progress report, Claire.
Yes, thank you. So internal audit progress report, this shows the work taken since the last audit committee meeting. We had, at the time of this report, 5 reports finalised, 2 substantial, 1 reasonable, 1 advisory and 1 limited. We also had 6 reviews at the draft report stage. We have actually now finalised 2 of those, but they'll come to the next audit committee meeting. We did have 3 reviews that were removed from the plan since the last meeting. They are listed at the bottom of page 3 of the report and top of page 4. These are around cabinet engagement. This is because of the work included within the GRIP, so work stream 3 of the GRIP. We're trying to avoid duplicating that. The Oracle project, similarly because of all the work with Grant Thornton around the finance modernisation, there wasn't felt anything that we would particularly add to that. And then the third one is the transformation and change governance audit. We are already doing a review looking at the savings programme. I know a lot of people have asked around the how achievable are savings, how are we monitoring them. We are doing an audit of that right now. The transformation audit was going to look at the transformation projects. Obviously, given the financial situation, a lot of the transformation projects are savings projects. So to avoid duplicating that, that is why that one has been taken out of the plan. We've added 3 reviews into the plan, 1 on housing allocations, health and safety in schools, and we've also added in days for the effectiveness of corporate governance. This is days that we've put into the plan to look at the GRIP, so any kind of areas of concern, looking at providing you with assurance. So when the question was raised around, they're all amber, this is giving us days within our plan and capacity to look at some of those areas further, for the benefit of the audit committee. We also have had quite a lot of audits ongoing at the moment. So we're looking at some of the areas we've talked about earlier, really looking at our financial position. So we've looked at things like income generation, budget delivery, savings programme, and finance business plans. A lot of these audits, we've actually changed the scope from how we traditionally do audit because of the changes that are going on at pace. We are looking at doing discovery work as things are changing. So really getting and supporting the finance modernisation programme, the GRIP, looking at how can we work with services to really discover any areas before it's too late. So it's kind of more proactive audits in those areas as well. And that was all I was going to say.
Thank you for the update. Councillor Higgins first of all, and Councillor Bells.
Is it possible for those savings reports to come to the next committee?
It should hopefully be finalised. If it's finalised in time, then yes, we can always bring it as a full report potentially. Yeah.
You happy with that, Chairman?
Yeah, I mean, I'm conscious of time management and the fact that we've overrun this time. I mean, I think it's an interesting topical subject. I think it would be of value, but I don't want to get into a situation where every single piece of work is coming. It builds on what we've been discussing today. If it's finished in time, should be. Thank you. Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that there was an intention to have a review of directorate governance, possibly to include directorate engagement with members. Can you confirm that it will be undertaken in the immediate future, or explain why not?
So we completed a review of directorate governance as part of the 24-25 plan, and that is what the GRIP is based on. So that was a report that went out in September 24. So it came to the audit committee in January 25 when it was finalised. That is then taken, the actions from that are then what is the GRIP is based on. So the actions from that, the recommendations from that a second column within workstream 2 of the GRIP, and all the subsequent action taken against that. Potentially what you're referring to is the Cabinet Engagement Report review that was in the plan. The reason that that was taken out is because of workstream 3 of the GRIP. So the work that's all ongoing, we're avoiding duplicating that. So we wouldn't add anything, and we don't want to do what the GRIP is already doing, because it wouldn't add any value if we're getting external support to look at that.
From a committee's perspective, I think Councillor Bowles probably worried that you were pressured in some way to remove it from the plan.
No, not at all. I had to go and inform them that I was taking out the plan, because it was more that I noticed that they were already doing other work, so it was my choice to take it out.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. A decision was made by officers in the Children's Service Directorate in the past 2 months to change the structure payment of funding to the special school. That change, both retrospectively and without notice to school, resulted in no payment being made to some schools in August. Could you consider, as a matter of urgency, looking at the designated school grant to ensure that the education finance function is following the scheme for financing school and the statutory guidance given by the Secretary of State to Section 48.4 and Paragraph 2A.2 of Schedule 14 to the School Standard and Framework Act 1998?
I don't want to jump in, but maybe if you want to consider that and provide a reply back to Councillor Nelson. I think there are probably many influences that go on the plan.
I was just going to say, if anybody does have any concerns or anything they'd like to include in the plan, then, send me details. That's okay. Obviously, we can always look into it. If it's not something that's a priority, if there's other source of assurance or if there's other reports going on, then we wouldn't necessarily do a full internal audit. But we do a lot of ad hoc consultancy. We do a lot of kind of I don't want to say investigations, that make me sound like I can't afford, but sort of high level kind of looking into things, not necessarily full audit as well.
So please, yes, if committee members have concerns, fire them to Claire. Claire, I've got one sort of slightly lower priority query. On page 5 of your report, the table, Appendix A, IA reviews. I know audit is an art rather than a science, but how have we got a reasonable assurance on the capital programme with 7 medium risk actions coming out of it, but a limited assurance on the PEEPs with only 3 actions?
That is a very common question that I get. The assurance level is not based on the number of recommendations that are raised, purely because if it was, you would get people nitpicking about, whether it's a medium or a low and how many there should be.
I'm sure that never happens.
Sometimes we group recommendations, sometimes we split things apart. The assurance level overall takes, the whole process based on the risks that we've looked at into consideration. So it could be that we had 3 risk areas, 2 of them had no findings, 1 had a lot of findings against it. Overall, it might have been still reasonable. It also depends on the potential kind of impact of some of those areas as well. They might be medium recommendations, but not necessarily have a sort of individually have a huge impact.
We're going to move on. Just a final point. Well done against your key performance indicators. I see the good scores and results that you've got there, so well done. Final agenda item, last but not least, agenda item 11, the Counter Fraud Progress Report. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Chair. I've had to sit quiet for a very, very long time. Yeah, I've been very good. I'd like to take the members through the Counter Fraud Progress Report, which starts on page 183 of your packs. Top headline is we've achieved £4.1 million of savings in Q1 against a target of £8.8 million for the year. Breakdown for you all on that. Some of the larger figures is 27 council properties recovered due to tenancy fraud, 5 emergency accommodation closed due to non-occupation, which is about £153,000 of savings, and a further 9 cases worth nearly £250,000 currently with housing for decision. You also noticed for the first time in the report that Camp Fraud has started to pilot and support our colleagues in debt recovery with face-to-face visits. It's been very successful in terms of return on investment. We've already collected £82,000 in lump sums and payment plans to date. We expect to expand that work going through into Q2 and into Q3. In NMDR, we've identified 2 businesses that were not listed for rates, and billings totalling £1.8 million have been issued. Before I move on and just talk about what Q2 looks like, I think it's really important and worth mentioning for the first time that this Q1 report, if you look at all the counter-fraud activity, it is data-driven, it is data-led, and that is really supporting our risk-based approach to deploying resources effectively, and it's showing through with the outcomes. Moving into Q2, that needs to continue, so there is an LRO going through Parliament at the moment, which will mean for the first time in 9 years, we can match social care data for the prevention and detection of crime. That is pivotal for us moving forward, looking at some of the fraud risks across the council. We're also looking at moving away from these rather lengthy reports that I write you, and we are working with some of Matthew's other teams to actually design a Power BI dashboard that will just visualise everything for you with a little bit of narrative. So it's far easier to go through. And I suppose going into Q2, what's also important is sustaining the performance we've got at the moment. That's all from me, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Alex. Councillor Mills first, and let's do it in opposite order.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just confirm, in terms of council tax liability on houses that have multiple tenancies, not getting into whether they're HMOs or not, just it's a growing number of more than 2 or 3 people living in the same place. Is the council tax liability still limited to the owner, or is it, if they're clearly separate demises being created, do they each now have their own council tax liability?
This is a little bit outside my remit, but I do know a little bit about this, and Andy knows far more than I do, so he might want to chip in a second. So we used to split HMOs because we could, if it was a large property, instead of the property as one hereditament as they call it, we would split it, say if it's 5 rooms, to 5 bands of council tax. We can no longer do that. There's change, Andy probably knows more about the dates and the consultation. Unfortunately, all HMOs are banded as one now. So it did affect our tax base at the time.
So the supplementary is, if it's not a formal HMO, does that rule still apply, or can you charge separately? And how do you therefore determine, if it's not an HMO, what stops you from us doing it?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, we don't separate. It's just one banding for the entirety of that hereditament, that property. We no longer can split out room by room. If someone converts a property into 3 flats, they're self-contained flats, that is totally different. Officers will go round and they will do the new build completion notices as required, and we will split that property from one house into 3 bands of council tax. But for HMO rooms, my understanding is that, Andy, I don't know if you want to add any more, the answer is whether it's illegal, slightly smaller than what HMO criteria is, we cannot band by room anymore, we band by one single property.
With your permission, Chair, very quickly, if therefore they are creating 3 separate flats, but not doing it in a formal way, is that an area where both council tax, Andy, and you, fraud, should be exploring opportunities, especially when councillors are reporting increasing number of such suspicious premises?
So in terms of the build and things going on, that would be planning enforcement. That is in their remit, and looking at that. If you have anything that you would think it might fall into my remit to do with fraud itself, you can always forward it to me anyway, because I can have a look at it and I can give it to the relevant person in the organisation.
Thank you, Jay. I don't have anything to add to that. Everything Alex said is correct. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you for confirming. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. Well done, Alex. My favourite part of the whole meeting, really, to be honest. Sorry. It's a bit, oh good, it's really brilliant. But I keep having this conversation with you, and I'm going to direct it to Tony, because I keep saying to you that this is a fantastic service that we provide. Why are we not providing it outside to get money in? We need money. This is You can do it on a commission basis, you can do it on or teaching people how to do it and getting other councils to do it. You know, you're a market leader, you won the awards, although you were sick, sorry about that. But I remember, so it's not really for you, it's really for Tony, is that this was meant to be explored last time, well, I think I've mentioned it now 4 times, so that's nearly 2 years now, isn't it? So where are we with that?
Tony, do you mind if I go first, or do you want to go first?
Because we have spoken about it, so
yeah, so I think there's look, it's a really good point, Councillor Higgins. There's many members, Councillor Mills has mentioned it before, senior leaders have mentioned it before. This is my, where we are with it. So a lot of the feedback we're hearing on the ground from people that have rather small counter-fraud teams are basically said, if it's something we wanted to do, we'll build it ourselves. Not interested in paying for services. Those councils, and there are 2 that I know of that sell their services, the problem they've had is they've shifted to the commission income-based, and the results in-house are not necessarily where they should be, in my opinion. So, considering where we are, and we've all just spoken about tonight on the financial journey this council is on, I'm not saying it's off the table, but I don't think it's the right time. I think the focus is for the counter-fraud team to be at the forefront of what this council needs at this time in terms of the financial challenges that we're seeing.
I appreciate that, but there is a tipping point. So where does it, where... I think the most problem with councils is that we don't look at how to generate income, and whether it's not the right time or the right time, you've got to take that leap of faith. And I just don't. If I have a business and I'm selling X product and it's going flying out the door, I order more, and I then get more retailers to sell it or more whatever to do. The same principle should be applying here. We should not be, because now look, your success is what. When did we, so it was at 3 years, was it 4 years? 2023, right? So that's now we're in 25. We were in a lot different position in 23 than we are now. For me, it's just, it's a no-brainer. And I appreciate what you're trying to say, but there's nothing harmful doing a desktop exercise to see whether those services can be developed. If you're award-winning, I know other authorities would really love to have you in, but it's obviously getting the right package together, how much we can get out of it as well.
It is true. Look, I take your point, Councillor Higgins. I stand by what I said. I don't think it's the right time. I think we need to focus on the here and now in this council. Again, it's something that's been battled around a long time. I've given my rationale why I think it won't work. A lot of counter-fraud managers or heads of internal audit, the answer has been particularly across London, which is where we'd want to partner, because remember, a lot of our success is about our visiting function, so we can't be driving miles and miles around the country. It wouldn't be effective. A lot of them is, well, if we wanted to replicate your model, we would do it ourselves. And that's particularly come out of LB-FIG, which is the Borough Fraud Investigation Group. Having said that, if any of our local authorities that were close to us that wanted to look into this with us, then yeah, it's something that we could explore.
Councillor Higgins.
You work very closely with the LGA. So is this something that's gone onto the table with the LGA?
No, so it's something that we've discussed. Obviously in-house, we put feelers out through the back door across London. So obviously there's something called LB-FIG, the London Borough Fraud Investigation Group. So all London boroughs are part of it, and some of the home counties. And it was just more of an off-the-cuff conversation. Now, one of the home counties is doing it themselves, but there just wasn't the traction. Everyone was like, if the Hillingdon model's great, everyone agreed it was a great model. But if we wanted to do it, we would do it in-house and build our own, because of the return on investment and the investor save model is there. We've been very fortunate here to have the support of this committee, the support of other members, CMT, to build what we've got to now. I think there is a natural evolution for fraud, where we start helping more in the debt recovery space in-house. So there is still next steps to keep pushing and striving for improvement.
So what is the next? So where is the point? So how much money do you think you still can save in the council?
That's a good question.
Because that's where the tipping point comes. Because
that's $1 million question.
If it isn't enough, then it is time to sell. And then maybe you need someone to sell it. I'll sell it for you. But
I think it's a good question, though. It is a fair, because but it's very hard to quantify what you don't know. So at the moment, we know right now, I think, I'm not sure of to become the report, but right now we're on about 135 live investigations in tenancy fraud. That has been sustained every single month since COVID. So my answer is it's still high risk, it's not falling away, it's really important for this local authority. Like you said, there may become a tipping point for this local authority where actually we need to pivot. So again, the data is really key to keep an eye on that, and when we look to pivot. There is a risk, there is a risk to that.
I think I'll echo Councillor Higgins' thoughts that, I think, and no doubt you'll do it, keep it under review, isn't it? When things are looking a bit tough here and we're scraping around, then maybe it'll be too late, but maybe not. Yes. Maybe that's when others could benefit from it.
It's something, like I said, we should never take off the table, and we just need to keep reviewing.
An excellent report, again, good progress, well done on your KPIs as well, and the savings made. I think the committee will be more particularly interested to hear more about the debt recovery work next time and how that's progressing. But unless there's any other observations, I think we'll move on and aim for a finish in just a minute. Thank you very much, Alex, and both Claire and Alex, thank you to the teams involved in supporting that work as well, and to the team supporting you, Matthew and Andy, too, of course. Last but not least, Ryan, anything on the future work programme?
The only thing just to mention there is an update on risk assessment procedures and budget setting and so on that was added after the May meeting, and because we've got regular updates on the GRIP now, I think it's been pretty much agreed that we don't need that as a separate item, so we are planning to take that off of the work programme.
Thank you very much. We've got a few actions. We'll look forward to the follow-on emails to that. It's been a long committee meeting. I apologise for it overrunning, but I think it was necessary. Thanks, committee members, for joining in, for your challenging questions. Thanks for officers for their responses. Councillor Higgins.
I would just like to say thank you to you for chairing the meeting really well, and just officers that realise that it's not personal, it's business, and I really mean that. So I always think you're all doing a fantastic job. As long as many of me know me, but I just wanted to make sure that I will put you over the coals if I have to. So.
And I was then trying to finish on a nice uplifting note. So thank you all very much indeed, and we'll look forward to the next meeting in a few months' time. Thank you.